Good evening, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being with us this evening. In 1985, when you had the idea and the vision to create the Overseas Security Advisory Council, what was the world like? And how does that compare with the way you see it today?
The world was in the midst of the Cold War. There was a certain odd stability about it. But there are also terrorist acts connected with it and unconnected. And we felt it quite a bit. I'm a Marine. I really felt the impact of the attack on our Marine barracks in Beirut, very personal. So, unfortunately, things were happening. And I thought, and colleagues around me thought, Admiral Bobby Emden, who had come in and study things, we got to do something better than just put up fences around our embassies or whatever we're doing. And I also had, before I was Secretary of State, been president of a big engineering and construction company, Bechtel. I'm very proud of them. And they have operations all over the world. So I had a feeling, I had a sense of what private people are feeling. So it seemed to me, you know certain things in government, and you have some sources that other people don't have. You also know things on the private sector that the government doesn't know and see. So I thought, why don't we get together, pool our information and our ideas on how to secure things, and create some sort of an organization to do it, so it has ongoing character to it, isn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. And it's been interesting to see how it grows, because you can't run everything from some central place. You got to have organizations out around the world where people are, and that's happened. And they're all over the place now, and it seems to me it's really important.
Well, you're right. We do have over 140 OSAC country councils in various cities around the world. Was that part of your original vision for OSAC, to have these local entities as well?
Well, it was part of our vision that we had to get out where the action is. We couldn't just sit in Washington. And I'm a believer that you got to get people out in the field working on these things. So, and also I'm a believer that private people have experiences and know things that we don't know, and vice versa. So it's an advantage to me to have been from the private sector operating internationally and come into the State Department from that setting.
Well, OSAC has a reputation now of being the premier public-private partnership, but at the time that you created it in 1985, there were no precedents for this type of cooperation and collaboration between the public and the private sectors that I'm aware of. Were there any models that you looked to in creating the OSAC?
I think if you think of something that makes sense, common sense. You know something, I know something, we're different. Why don't we share? Because we both confront the same problem. It's not complicated, it's simple. So we don't need a model. We can act on our own common sense.
Well, it's made an awful lot of sense, and I think it's done more than anything else that I'm aware of to assure the safety of Americans and American organizations overseas.
There are a lot of terrorist acts that didn't happen because we foresaw the possibility and took steps to stop them. And also, I think when people see that you're well prepared and you've done a good job on your security, there's a certain deterrent impact to that. So that's been good too.
There was over 18,000 individual constituents that participate in OSAC and about almost 4,000 organizations. Did you envision it to grow that big at the time that you started it?
I didn't have any idea it could grow that big, but it did seem to me that it's common sense to do this, and that it's common sense to say that you can't sit in some central place and operate it. You've got to get it out around where people are and where the action is.
So other governments, including the UK and the Japanese governments, have tried to establish OSAC-like organizations, but they haven't endured. The Department of State's Overseas Security Advisory Council has. Why do you think that is?
Well, I always think there's something special about America. We do a lot of things different from other people. We're more creative. So put this down as an American creation.
Excellent. Ron?
Wonderful, wonderful. Mr. Secretary, what was the most significant crisis you dealt with during your tenure as Secretary of State?
Well, the terrorist act, as I said earlier, that hit me the hardest, being a Marine, was the attack on our Marine barracks in Beirut. Killed 243 Marines. That really made a dent on me. It's the worst day of my life. So you have something like it happen, and then I could see other things. And I made a speech in 1984, I think it was, on terrorism, and saying that we had to do more than enforce the law. We had to try to beef up our intelligence and know about things that might happen before they happen, and then interdict them and stop them from happening. And that philosophy was controversial at the time, but I think it's basic to what we do. You don't just sit there and watch something happen, you know it's going to happen. That's foolish. You stop it in its tracks, and that's what we want to do.
What would you say would be, what would have been your most significant accomplishment as Secretary of State outside of establishing the Overseas Security Advisory Council?
Oh, most significant. Well, everything boils down to a human face. And I think in the overall Cold War setting, I worked very hard on the problems of Soviet Jewry. And there was a woman whose case I worked on, and I can remember this day saying, somebody said, a phone call is coming in. I picked up the phone. This little voice said, her name was, "This is Iden O'Dell. I'm in Jerusalem. I'm home." So you work hard, and people think of the big picture, help end the Cold War and so on. For me, it comes down to some human being is better off than they were before.
Yeah.
But I think in the case of our organization here that we're talking about, there are a lot of human beings that are more secure, able to do their job better, and around that otherwise would have had a much harder time. So I think it's a contribution to the quality of working life around the world and around the country.
In terms of what you see compared to 1985, the challenges don't seem to have changed that much. What advice do you have for all the security professionals that work within the Overseas Security Advisory Council to secure American businesses, American faith-based groups, non-governmental organizations, and academic institutions that have installations and operations around the world?
I don't agree with your statement that things haven't changed much. I think they've changed radically. And we have, at the end of the Cold War, with a lot of leadership from the United States, there had been created in the world a security and economic commons from which everybody benefited. I don't say there weren't threats, but there was a kind of commons. And that's kind of blown up. And there are all sorts of reasons for it. But we see the Middle East in complete flames. It's a complete mess. And we see the establishment of an organization that wants to establish a caliphate with global reach, which trains people in the art of terrorism and carries out acts. I think it's a much more dangerous world. So that only underlines the importance of being on the ball in our organizations and doing the job that we're doing. It would be nice if I could say the world has changed for the better and we don't need this anymore. You say that, you're kidding yourself. You've got to face the reality. It's a dangerous world, and we need to do everything we can to understand it and protect ourselves against the problems that it gives us.
You previously had said that you thought that American organizations and their roles overseas was one of the most important assets that the State Department had in advancing U.S. diplomacy and U.S. interests overseas. Do you still think that's the case, and what role do they have to play in advancing American interests overseas?
Well, I think when Americans go abroad, whether it's government officials or private, we are in a sense representing our country, our values, our creativity, our sense of human dimensions to things. And the more we can do that, the better. And part of that is helping everybody have a better sense of security. You can't really work very well in an environment where you're always looking around, where am I going to hit from next? So a secure environment is important, and if we can do that for ourselves and help other people get that, I think it's a big contribution.
We thank you for your time today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, and
Secretary.
Congratulations on this anniversary.
Thank you for your
And,
service.
I won't be around for the 60th, but anyway, I know it'll come around.